is happening. Early teenage pregnancies taking center stage within the Koboko jurisdiction. That would mean also HIV infections have been rising. We've been able to reduce HIV deaths within this country, but then the new HIV infections, especially among 15 to 19-year-olds, has actually increased. That's according to the experts and the information they are giving us right here on Morning at NTV. So we need to be doing more. There is more HIV prevalence among those people aged between, that is the age of 45 and also 49. The men, the prevalence is around 14%. When it comes to the women who are within that age bracket of 45 to 49, the prevalence of HIV amongst this group is at 12%. So we need to do more to cut down the prevalence of HIV and the new infections that are now at 38,000 every year. Remember, it is the adults that are infecting the younger ones. So if we are saying there's a higher prevalence rate of HIV among 45 to 49-year-olds, these are the same men who go down and lie to our young girls who are between 15 to 19 years of age, hence increasing the prevalence of HIV. We need to clamp down on this situation. We also do know that we have some 1.4 million people who are grappling with this disease within this country, but only 1.2 million are on treatment. That is a recipe for disaster. As long as those other people are not on treatment, yes, they are going to be infecting more and more girls in that regard, because they'll continue living a complacent life, a risky behavior, if you will. Let's get into more pertinent discussions. We want to talk about what is happening within the Greater Masaka sub-region. We have the Secretary General of the party that saw some of its members being accused of murder and attempted murder charges within the Greater Masaka sub-region. We are talking about Alan Sewanyana, Makindi West, and we are also talking about Muhammad Segirinya. That is Kawempe North. Away from that, we will also talk about the COVID-19 relief funds. You have legislators within Arua who who are working with the Parliament's Accounts Committee who were saying that leaders within Arua City were actually putting names of their friends and relatives as beneficiaries for this money. Gulu City also befell the same fate. It was also happening. We'll also talk about the Emyoga funds. Since July of last year, this money has not found its way into the hands of many of the beneficiaries. Alebtong has some 36 circles, but only 14 got a hand of this money. That's the latest we are getting right here on Morning at NTV. Also, the mega funds that are being allocated as seed money, people are saying 30 million for a big number of people. It's really little money in that regard. So it's going to be a multifaceted conversation, largely right here on Morning at NTV. David Louis Rubongoya is here, the Secretary General of NUP, the National Unity Platform Party. We also do have Mr. Herbert, yes, Taiyewa Musasizi. He is the MP for Kashongi County, that is in Chiruhura district. He's also joining us to make sense of what is happening within the country. Let me start with you, Mr. David Louis Rubongoya. Greater Masaka sub-region has been rocked over the past 5 to 6 weeks with machete-wielding men who have been hacking people to death. Now, the most contentious part is when some of your MPs, Alan Sewanyana and Muhammad Segirinya, were accused of having a hand in the orchestration of these killings. A callous development indeed. Do you really think they were involved? What exactly is happening? Help us make sense of what is happening as far as this case is concerned.
Yeah, I think the beginning point is to send deepest condolences to the people of Greater Masaka, who lost loved ones in these senseless killings, which, of course, up to now, we don't know exactly what exactly is happening in terms of investigations and all that. But away from that, I think there has been a deliberate attempt to project these murders as orchestrated by politicians. You had Mr. Chris Variomunsi first make reference to it. And then, of course, first of all, we treated it as a joke. And then a few days later, you had 2 of our members of parliament being summoned, and right now they are remanded at Chitalia, although, of course, some people who tried to access them were told they are not even there. But the role of investigations largely lies with the police and other security agencies. That is a constitutional mandate. The only challenge we have in this country is that all institutions, including the police, have been politicized. So I cannot stand here and say that indeed our MPs or these comrades of ours even have any hand in these matters, because we've seen how the state operates in this country. That very many times they've framed political opponents. And I don't need to go into many examples. You remember what happened to the Honorable Chagulanyi in Arua, where the state came out and paraded guns and claimed that they found them in his hotel room, only for them to drop the charges, and that ended there. Only yesterday, a lawyer called Nicholas Opio,
Yes.
who was hounded, taken to Chitaria, imprisoned on money laundering charges, and all the things that happened to him, and his organization has actually been closed, as you know, Chapter 4 Uganda.
Yes.
But yesterday the DPP came out and dropped the charges. After all that inconvenience, you can imagine, because they did not have the evidence. The judge last week said, you know, you've been dilly-dallying on this case. If no evidence is brought forth, we're going to dismiss this case.
Indeed.
So yesterday, the state entered the nolle prosequi and of course, withdrew the charges.
They had a 7-day ultimatum to do so.
Yeah, to do so. And this has been the trend. You know, this has been the trend. We are talking about our comrades, the Nubian Liz and Eddie Mutu and others, who spent 7 months at Chitaria, the state having claimed that they were found with 1 magazine and 4 bullets. Laughable. Over 49 people, that was the claim on them.
When they were nabbed in Kalangala, and then we later heard that they were in Makerere Kavule, that's where they had the ammunition. So how are you in 2 places at once?
Exactly. And in any case, they arrested them, I think, on the 29th of December, and then they say they found them with these items on the 3rd of January. So if the state continues to behave like that, then it loses credibility. When you come out and say these matters are politically motivated, we keep asking ourselves those questions. So what our demand has been as NUP has been, if you have evidence, produce it. You do not have a right to just inconvenience people, imprison them, hound them, torture them, subject them to humiliation and everything. These people have a reputation to protect. If you charge a member of parliament with murder, only for tomorrow to turn up that there was no evidence whatsoever, what are you doing? So we're saying if they have evidence, let them produce it. And let these our MPs be subjected to the due process of the law. Let there be a speedy trial as mandated by the law. And so let the evidence come out. I mean, you know how this state operates, all these cameras everywhere and all that. If they say these people participated in meetings, where are those meetings? Let them come out and show this evidence. You will remember that around 2016, 2018, 17, when there were murders in Masaka again, some people were paraded. And these people would later turn out, and these videos have been making rounds, these people would later turn out to say that, you know, we were promised money and everything by the police to come out and incriminate certain people. So we are seeing the same thing. For me, that's what I see. We're seeing a repeat of that kind of joke and sarcasm.
David Lewis Rumongoya, what is the end game for the government? Why would they want to frame opposition MPs, especially under NUP?
But that's what I've said. First of all, the regime in Uganda has been trying for a very long time to cluster us as violent people. You know? Because the regime does not know how to respond to citizens. When they raise issues, they have no argument to make. After 36 years in power, no services, the healthcare is limping, the education system is limping, all these problems we have. So when you come up and you're trying to challenge them and challenge their policies and everything, they say you're violent. Why? Because they want to deal with it violently. You remember, for example, the kind of election we just came out of. Every time you try to bring forth your argument, what the regime does is say that you're violent. And this you remember the Chiboko squad, you remember the crime preventers, and all these things that have happened in the past.
Yes.
There are protests in town, people dressed in civilian wear who turned out to be actually security operatives, come, start beating people, and then they try to use that as a pretext to say that you're violent. You will recall the PRI issue with Dr. Chiza Besigye. When he came up and posed a very big challenge to the regime, they claimed he was training rebels. And Dr. Chiza Besigye and many of his colleagues who were arrested, some of them, of course, murdered, they were never convicted for these offenses. No court convicted them in this country for the offenses they were alleged to have committed. So, are you then surprised I mean, are you, everyone would know why they would want to do that, because they want to project NUP and the opponents of the state as violent.
Wow. Mr. Taibwa,
yes.
What do you make of this? The government is trying to paint opposition National Unity Platform MPs as violent.
Thank you so much. Actually, in the first instance, we condole with the people of Masaka who lost their lives.
Right.
But one thing that comes out clear is that every time there is a crime, there must be a suspect. Because that crime cannot happen by itself. So there must be people who are suspected to have been involved in that crime.
Right.
And I think, how do they suspect them? Some intelligence information comes out, and that's why they suspect them, until proved guilty by the courts of law. But before that, some intelligence information comes out, and they point fingers on Herbert, on so and so.
Yes.
So the question is, why not me? Why my fellow colleague, Honorable Sewanyana? Why my fellow colleague, Honorable Segirinya? It means that there is some pointers coming from somewhere that are directing to them. So my appeal is that we leave the court process to do its work. And if they are found out not have been guilty, not have been involved in the crime, they will be set free. It has happened so many times that very many people who have been taken to be suspects, courts have proved them not to be guilty, and they have left them free. So I want to think that the government institution, the police, is doing its work, and we can give it an opportunity to do its work and come up with a solution. Because what remains a fact is that crime has taken place in Masaka, and somebody must be responsible somewhere for that crime. Yes.
And by someone you mean this opposition MP?
No, not necessarily opposition MP. I'm not looking at the opposition MP to have been involved in that crime. But I'm saying it could be an opposition MP, it can be anybody, but as long as we know that crime has taken place, there's somebody responsible. Now, the intelligence information comes out and points a finger, for example, at me. The moment it points at me, then I'm a suspect. And then police can do its work. What we believe is that later, the court process will take place and will exonerate me if I'm not guilty.
You have other political experts who contend that this is a ruse orchestrated by the government to clamp down on the National Unity Platform Party, and there are other activities that they were expediting during this whole political period. They were planning some peaceful protests. They were planning so many other activities. So now, by keeping them in court, focusing on these murder cases within the Greater Masaka region, it will be a very good diversionary tactic. That's what people are saying. This is a diversion to keep NUP busy in courts of law, other than other activities that they wanted to engage in.
I don't want to think so. I don't think that these are trumped charges against the opposition parties. But we also need to understand that many times the opposition parties have been trying to ensure they bring in things that would make the people hate the ruling government, right? And one of them could be that what can we do so that people hate what they call the dictatorship, and they mobilize enough to see how they can push out the dictatorship. One of those could be that. Try to do all this crime so that people lose hope in the security of the country, and after that say, no, this government has killed us, and for that matter, we should not go with it. So I cannot rule it out. And in any case, I'm not the person who should. The government institutions are there. There is intelligence, there is police, there are courts of law. They are able to come out and exonerate whoever is suspected to be a criminal than myself.
So far, David Louis Rubongoya, 70 people have been arrested. 10 people saw a day in court. That is as of September 1st. They'll be appearing in court again tomorrow, I believe. That is Masaka Chief Magistrate's Court to answer more of these charges. Now, most of these suspects, he said something that whenever there is a crime, there's a suspect. Now, many of the suspects that were nabbed pinpointed Muhammad Segirinya and Alan Sewanya as people who actually paid them money to go and orchestrate these killings. Isn't that proof enough that these MPs were actually involved in these heinous crimes, and it's not stage managed as many contend?
But that's what I'm saying. And I mean, you just have to be a visitor in Uganda to make the kinds of claims he's making. When you say institutions are there, the police is there, I mean, I've just given examples here of how the police has, on several occasions, come up to make all sorts of allegations which actually turn out not true. So when you say that these people will have their day in court and that kind of thing, we want to have independent institutions, and that is what our struggle is about. I wouldn't have any problem, by the way, because any person can commit a crime, but the institutions must be independent. If the police was independent, if the DPP's office was independent, I would rest knowing that the investigations are going to be perfectly done. But in a situation where I've just reminded you of how many times opposition leaders have been, I mean, to date, as I speak, we have hundreds of our people still held in different prisons. And if you look at the litany of charges against them, majority of them are just clearly trumped up. They just they would arrest people, some of our people, take them somewhere, make them put on a red beret, or some of them give them other items, take a picture of them, and say we found you with military material, and therefore justify their trial in military courts. So that's the kind of state we're talking about. We're not talking about a state where the police is going to do its investigations independently and come up with a solution. So this is what I'm trying to explain to you, that the members of parliament, and you know, like I said, this has had a history. For a very long time, General Museveni and his regime have come out to say NUP are violent people, they want to make Uganda ungovernable. These are not our tactics. I've heard the honorable member talk about the fact that maybe it is our intention to make the government unpopular and all that. That is what NRM did when they were coming here. General Tafiri was at a barrier where he said, you know, they would go do certain things and make the government of the time, the UPC government and all that, look bad in the eyes of the public. That's not our approach. We do civil politics. We are a non-violent group of people, and we have made that very, very clear. We believe in non-violent violent tactics, and we have a superior argument. The things that we've been talking about, every citizen of Uganda can see them. So we wouldn't need, in any case, if you look at the greater Masaka area, these are people who voted for us overwhelmingly. We cannot turn on them and start killing them.
But these are very, very strong allegations, David Louis Rubongoya. When you do have the presidency minister coming out, and she's Babalanda, and she actually says you are trying to paint the government in a bad picture so that people can't rise up and put this government down. Those are very, very strong allegations. But
that's what I said. First of all, they think that maybe we do things the way they did them when they were coming here, because that was their approach. You know, they would go do all sorts of things and so as to make the government, the UPC government, unpopular.
Indeed, that's what he did 1980 when he lost, 1981. It was not a campaign to say, vote for me, but let's remove this government.
Let's remove this government. And that's what I'm saying. That was their approach. Our approach
but we haven't seen this happen in the Greater Masaka area, courtesy of your MPs.
No, but anyway, in any case, when they say that it is NUP doing these things, in 2017, 2016, NUP was not there. Even the People Power movement had not yet started. So how can you say that these murders are linked to NUP when actually you had
murders in 2017?
You had murders in 2016, 2017, 2018. You know, so they just really lose the argument. And at that time, the investigations were never conclusive to tell us exactly what was happening. We saw them parade one Nachamba Day and that kind of thing, and then talk about Muhammad Chidawalime and all that. But up to now, and you saw immediately after, some young men came out on TV. I don't know if the honorable member here has seen them, and clearly say that we were paid by the police. We were promised money, we were promised wealth to come and claim that so-and-so actually was sending us to kill people, which was not true.
But
go ahead, Taiwo.
Yes, but one thing that comes out clearly, I don't think police has come out and say we have arrested NUP leadership, the honorable members of parliament who happen to be NUP members. No. It must have come out to arrest individuals in the names of Sewanyana and Honorable Sigirinya. It only happens that they are members of NUP. So I don't even think in their prostitution they're indicating them as members of NUP. No. But one thing that must come out clearly is that a crime has taken place. Somebody must be responsible. And who is this somebody? Now, somebody who is responsible, how do you come to it? Pointers have come and said, this is so and so. So,
but then Taiwo, he also mentioned something that yes, these are the machete-wielding men wearing the very ugly hats this year. But then even in 2017, when NUP was not here, they took center stage. So who was behind those attacks?
No, that's what I'm saying. That they are individuals involved in crime. It only happens that now the individuals pointed out to be involved in crime are members of NUP. And I don't think the prosecution has come out to say, we are arresting you because you are NUP members or NUP leadership. No. They are arresting them as individuals who have been pointed at, have been perpetuating the crime.
But don't you think this is all stage managed, Taiwo? Simply because these are leaders who are largely voted within a jurisdiction, and then they go there and they start hacking people. It's like President Museveni winning so much in Western Uganda, and then we hear he's the same one,
Yeah, but
orchestrating attacks within
but
Western. But why would that happen?
I have said it clearly, and he has actually even admitted it, that in order to discredit the government, you must do things that people will hate this government.
What did I admit?
He even said it, that the NRM government, when it was coming in the 80s, it started doing things which would make people hate the UPC government. He said it.
And he says he
and I say this is not our approach.
It's not their approach.
So whether it's their approach or not,
Yes.
that's a different case. But the indication is that it's possible, it can be done that way, that you do a lot of crime, people look at the government not be giving them enough security, and therefore hate that government. So we cannot rule it out. But what I wanted to come out clearly is that my honorable colleagues, and it's very unfortunate, they are not being arrested as members of NUP. They are being arrested as people have been pointed to have perpetuated the crime. I think from intelligence sources, I'm not an intelligence officer, but that's what I want to believe. And secondly, if he says they do not believe in government institutions to be doing their work and that the government institutions have been politicized, I don't think so, because we think that these government institutions are in place and they are doing their work with a lot of integrity. It could be his thinking, and I expect him to think so. Because the fact that he's in opposition, he cannot come here and say, no, the government institutions are not doing things.
Do you believe this is a very independent investigation, Mr. Taiwo?
Yes.
An independent investigation where the security minister comes out and says, please, security people, local people, do not divulge any information to the MPs under the Internal Affairs and the Defense Committee. Why would that happen if it's not partisan?
No, but of course, there are two things I want to believe in. That an independent investigation can be done irrespective of what the minister does or says. An independent institution can do its work irrespective of what the minister says, because the minister does not direct it. Even if I was the one and I'm doing my work, even if the president directs this, and I know it is in the contrary of what I should be doing as an independent person, I will continue to do it.
Of course, Maurice Abongo, an independent person and OC of
Yes.
Masaka police station, did the same. He continued divulging this information. He ended up 3 days in office.
Yes, but
he ended up 3 days in jail.
But you see, the truth would finally...
Being interrogated, why did you give out this information? Is that procedurally right?
No, it may not be procedurally right, but I think if your conscience tells you that what you're doing is what you're supposed to do, then you can continue on doing it. What comes after may be a different story. So, my thinking is, we should not politicize. We should not politicize the criminality in Masaka. If it is me and the finger points on me that I'm perpetuating that crime, let me be taken as Honorable Tayebwa, not because I'm Honorable Tayebwa of NRM.
It's like you're pointing fingers at the president who is already politicizing this issue.
Exactly. And maybe if I will remind him, the Minister of Internal Affairs was on TV the other day saying that, you know, when Masaka was under NRM, it was safe. Now that it is under NUP, it is no longer safe. What do you make of that? Who is politicizing this? You know, so when you, first of all, when you come up and say that, you know, investigations, let's give them a chance. Again, what I really always find trouble with some of my, these people in NRM, they wait until they are victims of these kinds of things for them to wake up and realize, oh, actually, this is what you're dealing with. You don't wait, you don't need to wait, because everyone in this country has seen how, I mean, I could ask you a question, what happened to the guns that the state brought out? Clearly marked and said, we found this in Honorable Chagulanyi's room, hotel room in Arua. And, you know, there was a lot of chaos, he was taken to the court martial, all sorts of things happened to him, and all of a sudden, the guns disappeared. I mean, would it make any logical sense? For example, I just talked about the situation with people who were arrested in Kalangala, and the state claimed that these were found with bullets and a magazine in Kavule. What happened to that? So, why do you support NRM and you come here to support whatever? Please, let's be logical about these things, and say and admit that they are institutional failures here. I'm not an investigator, and that's why we've said that if the state claims that Honorable Sewanyana, Honorable Segirinya are involved in these things, let the evidence be brought forth, Because when you say that, you know, people implicated them, I mean, I've just given examples of how many times these young people are given money and told, you go and implicate so and so. That's what we're dealing with, an institutional failure in this country.
Yes.
And so, for us, that is why we are struggling in the first place. We're struggling to make sure that institutions such as the police and all these other institutions, the DPP and all these, are independent. And I want to remind him about the inconvenience. He's talking about his honorable colleagues and saying, you know, let the investigation take their course. But if you look at the case of Nicholas Opio, for example, a human rights lawyer, he was arrested on money laundering charges, taken to Chitaria. He spent the Christmas holiday there. All that inconvenience. Now, several months later, they say we have withdrawn the charges, the state is no longer interested. The inconvenience to these individuals, the reputation which they have, you know, built over time, for you to just drag it into the mud, just over baseless allegations that you put on them. It's a shame. Do you think of Mr. David Louis Rubongoya, this is a ruse on part of the government to waste time for the opposition so that you do not engage in any fruitful activities, so that by the time we go into 2026, you haven't built any structures. You've been in courts of law. You've been running amok. Many of my political experts whom I was talking to this year actually predicted this debacle, whereby government will try so much to keep you in the courts of law so that by 2026, you haven't engaged in any fruitful activity to mobilize the masses against the NRM government as far as elections are concerned. Yeah, but of course, like I said, the intentions or the actions of the state are always intended to discredit, demoralize, destroy, derail, do all sorts of things in that line. So when you look at the way they treated Dr. Besigye, and I would encourage everyone who has not read Dr. Olive Kopsinger's book called The Correct Line to do so, because it details some of these things that they did, or even a book called The Trials and Tribulations of Dr. Besigye. He's court-martialed, and because they claim he's training PRA suspects, they go around the districts of Kanungu, Lukunjiri, places where he had actually a lot of support. They arrest his mobilizers, they arrest people who are doing work for him, take them to the court martial. Some of them, even in your area, in Greater Bushenyi area, actually people, Greater Bushenyi, Chiruhura and other places, those who were perceived to support Dr. Besigye, who are strong supporters, in some cases they even planted guns in the houses of those people, and then use that as a pretext to take them to the court martial and take them through all these things. Actually, these things are on record. Someone just needs to dig that history and see it. So the intention here, in my view, is not only to waste our time, but also to discredit us within the population. To say, oh, you see these people that you've been supporting, they are murderers. They are what? They are this and that. So that is the intention. They want to keep you busy in all these kinds of baseless charges, but also on the other hand, try to discredit you, to derail you, but also to try to project you negatively in front of the international community.
We're going for a short break, but Herbert is itching for a response. Yes, I'll give you a minute.
Actually, I wouldn't think so. I wouldn't think government. I wouldn't think government would want to do that in order to waste your time or inconvenience you.
All right.
Because one thing that comes out clearly is that if government does that, it gives you unnecessary popularity, right? It gets you a lot of sympathy.
Having charged with murder?
From many people. That's what I'm saying. So, when you refer to the cases of Besigye and whatever, it is actually very clear that as government was trying to come up with the charges against Besigye, there were people who were looking at it that it's being politicized and is getting a lot of popularity, a lot of sympathy, and which was not necessary. So government cannot come to do that because it would be giving you unnecessary popularity, political mileage. But me,
being persecuted, please come behind me.
Now, I'm looking at the government doing what it's supposed to do. And I want to insist clear that if there is no crime, then there is no suspect. But where there is a crime, there is a suspect. And unfortunately, that the suspect happens to be a member of National Unity Platform. So we shouldn't look at somebody as a member of National Unity Platform. We should look at the person as an individual that has been pointed to be a suspect. And we don't think that if you are a suspect, then the courts of law will go through the process and prove you guilty or not. Yeah.
That's what democracy is all about. The, yes, possibility of having Mr. Taiwo Musasizi Herbert within the studio and David Louis Ruwongoya, different political parties, but they are not trading any blows, simply talking and ironing out these issues. That's what democracy is largely all about. If there wasn't democracy in Uganda, you'd be seeing security apparatus swooping over these offices or studios trying to arrest one of my guests. But that is not happening, and that should actually go to paint the reality that we do have some kind of democracy within this country. Let's take a breather. We'll return shortly.
NTV.
All right, welcome back, and many thanks for staying with us right here on Morning at NTV. We are still pretty much here in studio. We haven't seen any presence of security members trying to arrest either David Louis Ruwongoya or Mr. Herbert Taiwo. So meaning there is some kind of democracy within our country. But then when I broke off, there was a charcoal from David Louis Ruwongoya, meaning he could beg to differ. So let's get his views on that. Why do you think there's no democracy in the country?
Of course, I was extremely shocked, first of all, that you said that there's some form of democracy in this country.
You know why I think there's democracy? Because if there were no democracy within this country, David Louis Ruwongoya, you wouldn't be talking to Romeo Busiku. I'll be dead already.
Yeah, well,
I used to be very, very vocal towards this government. And when I survived those years, I was like, maybe. The president is not a dictator, as they actually contend he is. The barrage of criticism I used to levy on him, age limit and everything, all I could grapple with was maybe some jail time for a couple of days. But I didn't die. They didn't try to kill me. I'm still here.
But they don't have to kill you for them for there to be no democracy. You know, when you're studying political science and constitutional law and all that,
yes,
you learn that there are different kinds of dictatorships, and we have these absolute dictatorships or extreme dictatorships, and then we have what we call hybrid regimes, or what you call benevolent dictatorships, and that's what we live under. They try to make a semblance of democracy. You have elections every 5 years, but they're not free and fair, but they're elections. You saw what kind of election we had. In an absolute dictatorship, you will not have an election at all. But in this kind of setting, there will be an election. And then, you know, they will claim that, oh, we vote every 5 years. But the election is not free and fair. They will allow you have some seats in parliament. You know, a few of the seats in parliament, so that they go out there and tell people that, you know, there is democracy because we have some members of the opposition in parliament and that kind of thing.
By allow, you mean the NRM won in some areas and they allowed you to win in some other areas?
I mean, that is how the system is designed. That's how the system is designed. They will, for example, in the presidential election, they will give you a 30-something%. And
so it's them to give you, not the voters?
Yes, because the voters have voted you overwhelmingly. In my view, won this election outstandingly.
You still contend that not won this election?
Of course. And I think every Ugandan there, a Ugandan who is logical enough would understand that what we had was a sham election. Where I don't know even where the Electoral Commission was.
We've since waited for this evidence, Ruwongoya. It has
but we put it up. I told we laid it before the nation. Immediately started uploading it on our website. The website was attacked and put down, and we have this evidence. It is still with us. And you remember when we tried to present it to the Supreme Court, and the Supreme Court rejected it, and then we decided to withdraw that case.
So go ahead. Go ahead.
So the point I'm making is that when you have a benevolent dictatorship, you have courts of law. Once in a while, you will win a case in the courts. But on the more contentious issues, for example, of challenging a presidential election and all that, you will never have a good judgment in the favor of the truth. So this is what we call a hybrid regime. And what we've been seeing, of course, is that they've been, as time goes by, as time goes on, they lose the shame. And I think we are progressing steadily into an absolute dictatorship. Because if you see, maybe 10 years ago, 5 years ago, we've been continuing on that path. And it is clear that if the people of Uganda do not rise up and defend themselves at this time, by, you know, in a few years it will even be worse. So that is why we are always awakening the people to make sure that they rise up and use and exercise their constitutional power to ensure that our country does not descend into an absolute dictatorship.
But by rising up, won't the country descend into chaos other than the dictatorship that you contend is taking?
No, you see,
by rising up, what exactly do you mean?
The Article 3 of the Constitution of this country is very clear. The role of the citizens to defend the Constitution. and talks about using all means to defend the constitution in
all
Uganda.
legal means.
Yeah, all legal means to defend. So it is not, the people of Uganda have a right under the constitution, and the framers of the constitution knew that we would reach this point. And that is why Article 1 of the Constitution says that all power belongs to the people.
But that could never happen in a situation whereby Ugandans rise up to actually picket because government would pounce on them in the shortest time possible. But such factors and everything you've mentioned, does that actually prove that we've not made any strides as far as multi-party politics is concerned since 2005, 16 years ago? Well,
I think the gains that we made at some point have all been eroded. Would you now call what we have a multi-party democracy where, for example, I'm in NUP. Can we go to his constituency and open our office? Yes. And it is not raided?
He's telling you yes.
Actually, of course he knows, but you're a journalist. Indeed. You know what has happened to our offices in Lira, in Gulu, in Chiruhura itself. We had an office in Chiruhura and it was raided.
Actually,
so when you talk about, when you say that there's multi-party democracy means that all political parties have a right to go out there, sell their agenda to the people. You saw what happened during the elections. NRM politicians were holding rallies, massive rallies, in some cases in churches. The pictures are there.
In a nutshell, it's like you're saying, David Louis Rubongoya, that the NRM party actually controls how much democracy other opposition political groups enjoy. That's what I'm saying. In theoretical terms, we are under one-party rule. All right. But, like I said, because they want to give a semblance, and the good thing is that if you go and read the history of the NRA, you should read a book called Mission to Freedom, because the same things are what they were choosing UPC of. They were saying, you know, UPC tries to show that there's a semblance of democracy, have a court, but then there's no court. You can never relate the machinations of this government to the UPC. In 1980, the UPC made sure most of the opposition political groups did not get nominated in that regard. Have you seen this take center stage under President Museveni, whereby they actually work so hard to ensure opposition political groups do not get nominated, or even individuals do not get nominated, and they ensure they will kill you so that you do not get nominated? Has that taken center stage? But of course, you see, because that's what used to happen during UPC. No, actually, tenure. Actually, first of all, the question is who are the actors? I already told you that the NRM was doing a lot of things, or the actors now in NRM are doing a lot of things to discredit the UPC government, and even to discredit the Amin government even before then. But even after that, what you see, they were accusing UPC of gerrymandering. Yes. You know, create all these constituencies to favor themselves. This is what we see. Ballot stuffing. This is what we had in this election. Making sure that the opposition does not campaign. This is what we saw in this election that we just had. Arresting agents. We deployed agents across the country, and most of them were arrested by the police and the military. So, but we haven't seen political heads being targeted to be killed in broad daylight, just like during But what happened? What happened to the Honorable Chagulanyi in Arua? Do you remember that Yasin Kauma was seated exactly where Honorable Chagulanyi was seated a few minutes before he was shot dead? Do you remember that Dr. Chiza Besti was almost blinded from Mulago when they did all sorts of things to him? I mean, have you, the people that we've lost ever since the People Power movement came up, our supporters and... A very contentious conversation I'm having with David Louis Rubongoya. He is the Secretary General of the National Unity Platform Party. They still have some of their supporters languishing within the various jails within this country, courtesy of the November campaigns that took center stage. Remember what took center stage in Luka? Yes, they do still have some supporters languishing within the jails. But then he mentioned something, that is, this is a one-party state. How about Tayibwa Musasizi? Yes,
actually I was here feeling uncomfortable because of the statements that came from my brother. Because
you're here, NRM, he's here, National Unity Platform Party, but he's still content.
I want actually to bring the attention of my brother that in Uganda we have obsolete democracy.
Go ahead. Why?
Absolute democracy.
Absolute democracy. And the examples he has actually been referring to.
You mean absolute?
Yes.
Not obsolete?
No, absolute.
Because when you say obsolete,
no,
it
not
means
absolute. Not something.
Yeah.
Absolute democracy.
Yes. 100%.
Yes. And why am I saying this? He shouldn't hide his head in the sand. I'm going to give practical examples that have happened.
Please,
and he talked of
it's imperative that you do. Then we get into COVID, the relief money, and Emioga.
The elections have been carried out. If you look at since 2005, since we went to multi-party politics, the trend of how people have been exercising their right has been changing. I will give an example. In those early years, the northern part of the country was actually opposition. The central part of the country was actually NRM, and that's how they voted. Now, in the recent elections, the northern part of the country voted NRM. The central part of the country voted opposition.
Yes.
Right? In my own constituency, which is ideally NRM or basic major NRM, we had some...
Morning at NTV would like to veer away from this conversation. How about Taiwa? So please largely conclude by telling us whether or not there's been progress made as far as multi-party politics is concerned.
There's been a lot of progress. There is a lot of progress. Actually, some of us think that we have too much democracy that has actually affected our people and even affected their production.
Too much?
Yes. There are so many things we look at and say government has really brought a lot of democracy that people have actually gone into what they are not supposed to do because of too much democracy.
Too much democracy when people are being arrested incommunicado?
No, you cannot stop to arrest any criminal, and because people are trying to politicize criminality. Every crime that is done, you must be arrested. If you are not a criminal, you are not arrested. So we should not look at criminals being arrested and we say they are just being arrested because of politics.
If you're not a criminal, you'll not be arrested. But we haven't seen any arrests being levied towards those politicians, those leaders within the various jurisdictions in this country who stole COVID-19 relief funds. Mr. Taiwa, let's make sense of what is happening in that sphere, and then we leave the other political conversation away.
Actually,
let's talk about COVID-19 relief funds.
Actually, the COVID-19 relief fund, those who stole it will definitely be prosecuted. The question is, have they investigated and found that exactly they stole it? Because there are two things. You can be suspected, a rumor can come up, but if the investigations are carried out and they found you to have stolen this money, there's no reason why you cannot be prosecuted. And
do you think the merger of the agencies, departments and ministries is the antidote that we needed since time immemorial to do away with the corruption that has taken center stage?
But I think the merger, which is actually being coming out as a government program, is not necessarily about corruption. No, it's about streamlining service delivery.
I see.
Because even in ministries, there's corruption.
But it's not the first time it is happening. They did it at first, then they abandoned it. Now we are reviving it again. So if it didn't work before, why are we sure it will work now?
No, in any case, it might even not go through. Because we are still studying. Parliament has actually constituted a committee to go and study further and see whether what the executive is coming up is right. So I wouldn't conclude that we are going to merger before Parliament comes in.
So you were never consulted?
We are never consulted.
Because it's already taking center stage?
No, it's not taking center stage. You see, one thing that comes out clearly is that these agencies came as out of Act of Parliament. And that Act of Parliament must be repealed. And it is Parliament to repeal. So Parliament to repeal those acts which form those agencies must be convinced that yes, the mergers should actually come up. Agencies should be scrapped, and then we merge to those agencies.
David Louis Rubongoya, do you think the merger of these agencies will do away with the corruption we are seeing, or actually do the opposite? You have Uganda Human Rights Council that is being merged with another organization, the Equal Opportunities Commission. You understand? One is largely handling vulnerable people, Equal Opportunities Commission, and the other is largely handling human rights in that regard. Do you think with the merger taking center stage, the Uganda Human Rights Commission might not be able to focus on the human rights aspect?
Yeah, well, first of all, I want to, you did say we should move on from that conversation, but I just wanted to
Please do, it's important.
I just want to get out some misinformation. The Honorable Boya said that government has brought a lot of democracy. I want to remind him that democracy is not a favor from every government, it is an entitlement. Human rights are inherent, they are not granted by anybody. Ugandans are entitled to democratic government, and we are going to continue struggling until we achieve that. Now, about the merger of all these institutions and all that, Uganda's problem is governance. Governance is a problem of this country. You can talk about all sorts of policies, you can bring all sorts of interventions. We've just been talking about Emyoga in the break and before the show, and the government has come up with all sorts of things. They bring NADS today, they bring youth livelihood, they bring whatever, but as long as you do not deal with the governance question from the top, you're just wasting time.
Is that why you end up with the leaders stealing the money instead of giving it to the beneficiaries?
That's what I'm telling you, because you know why they gave out money this time? They said that the distribution of posho and beans initially was riddled by corruption.
Yes.
They said, now let's change. We're not going to give out food, we're going to give out money. And the corruption in money turned out to be worse than the corruption that was there when they were dealing with the posho and beans. So that's what you have, regardless of the interventions. You're now talking about merger of entities and all that. First of all, we've been clearly saying that there should be a lean and efficient government in this country. You don't have to have, just look at a district. You have an RDC, you have an LC5 chairperson, you have a DISO, you have chief administrative officer, you have, and if you look at their roles and functions and all that, you'll find that a lot of times there's duplication of roles. And we've been clear that as NUP, our policy is to make sure that the government is lean but efficient. We want to put a lot of money in production and not in public expenditure and public administration. So that would be a good intervention. But as long as there's a lot of politics, and even if they merge these institutions, you'll see that the corruption will still be there. It will in fact increase. And that will not, in my view, increase the efficiency. As long as the people who are appointed to head government institutions, for example, are mainly appointed on not on the basis of merit, but on the basis of their political leanings, on the basis of who they are related to in government, etc., etc. You'll not have the problem solved.
Well, of course, a lot of problems have actually dogged many of these interventions. COVID-19 relief funds, Myoga, a lot of controversy. They've been abused. The funds have been abused. But if the National Unity Platform Party were the party in power, how do you have handled this issue?
Of course, we've put out our COVID approach. We've made it very clear what we'll be focusing on. For example, first of all, some of these interventions, even when they are good, because a stimulus relief fund would be a good idea. But the question is, how are you distributing this money? Who is in charge? But most importantly, if someone commits an offense or embezzles this money, what happens to them? I'll remind you that after the first lockdown, there was a lot of corruption. The Auditor General released a report where he actually indicated how government lost a lot of money. Tell me that you got one official of those who are mentioned in the Auditor General's report being held accountable.
Or even arrested.
They are not arrested. So that gives others the leeway to know, these things are just a joke. So
and that waters down Tabor's argument that when there is a crime, people will be arrested. People
will be arrested, exactly. I mean, it's a joke. So you have people who stole the COVID funds in the first place, using that money as they wish, and then nothing is happening to them. You have an IGG, you have Auditor General, you have the Anti-Corruption Court, then you have another unit in State House dealing with corruption, but they are not dealing with the real issues. Now, that gives other people chance to feel that they can actually embezzle funds for COVID another time and another time. And I can tell you that if tomorrow there's another intervention, still corruption will be there, and there will be nothing done.
But guess what we are seeing in the clip on your screens, ladies and gentlemen? Those are the officials apologizing and saying, we are sorry we took the money. Forgive us, we shall refund it. Don't you think if we do not put a punitive action indeed, against, or punishments against these errant government leaders, this will continue?
But before we continue with that, one thing I want to say is that it's true there is moral decadence in the country. And it's not about governance, because even if NUP comes into power, it will still use the same population of Uganda. It will still use the same people in Uganda to govern this country. Now, what we should pray for and actually
Are you sure that is for a fact that NUP will use the same Ugandans?
Yes. Is it going to bring Kenyans to come and govern this country?
Not really. The fact is that the NRM has been using the same leaders or officials since 1986. No, almost. You've only added a few people. Actually, so meaning if NUP is to come into power, they will make sure that they flush out the whole system and bring in new people, new Ugandans who have been excluded from the NRM government.
Well, actually, what you need to understand is that who gets the opportunity. The moral decadence in this country, which we pray God should stop, is that it only comes who gets the opportunity to be in that position. And why am I saying this? All these anti-corruption institutions, right? Start away from police, start away from IGG, start away from anti-corruption. All these ones have been put there to stop corruption.
Would you agree that most of this corruption is meted out by people who have overstayed in their offices? They've actually learned the loopholes within the office, and that's why they are stealing.
Not even necessarily that. Not even necessarily that.
I've been in office for 10, 15 years.
Not even
I know all the
necessarily that.
loopholes.
Not even necessarily that.
Shouldn't we change the system?
My point is that whoever gets an opportunity to be in that office and his integrity is questionable, he will definitely do what his predecessor does. You can stay in an office for even 20 years or 30 years when your integrity is high and you're not corrupt. You can leave this office and somebody else comes, irrespective of the government that comes in, somebody else comes in and he will do the same. So to me, what is important is that the moral decadency in this country. But if we can all be, we can be rightful people, irrespective of whichever government that comes in, would utilize our same resources. Because one thing that comes out clear is that whether it's this government, whether it's another government, the resources this country has.
I'll tell you a statement that has become a chorus, Mr. Taiwo, one too many times within this country, that we do have very great government programs, we do have very great interventions, but the problem is the implementation of the same programs. Meaning the people at the helm of the implementation are the biggest problem. So if we do not change the person, you know, we'll continue with the same status quo.
But you see, I also disagree.
Yes.
You see, that's why I said the problem is governance. Corruption begins from the top, right from State House, and goes up to the family level, or LC1 if you want to call it, in government.
David Louis Rubongo, you need to give the president credit. He has come out to say...
But what you say and what you do are different things.
Those people who are being tortured shouldn't be tortured. Carter rustlers shouldn't be tortured.
And that's exactly what I'm telling you.
Because he believes peace resides in the hearts of people.
Now, what I want to say is, if the president goes around, for example, during elections, you know how much money is used to bribe people over the years, every election. Bribes people, the system of patronage, you know it. You've been seeing him giving directives which are extremely illegal to UNRWA. Give this contract to so-and-so and make sure all government procedures are followed. That's not his role.
Do you believe the Emyoga money was also a bribe in its own mind because the money was released during campaigns?
Of course it was. It was a bribe in many ways. And I want you to go back and look at all the elections that we have. Every election, they say now, we're going to have this kind of intervention, and then people just get this money. You had Entandikwa, you had NADS, you have Operation Wealth Creation, you have all these things, which are used most importantly for patronage. Now, if the corruption is beginning in the high places, don't expect corruption to be dealt with in these agencies that you're talking about. In fact, as NUP, we are not even saying that we are going to change all these actors in these offices. It is the culture that begins right from the presidency, the person who's in charge of the country, goes to cabinet, goes to parliament, goes to agencies, goes everywhere. Once you make sure that there's zero tolerance for corruption, right from the top, you will not see corruption in society. So I don't agree that when you say moral decadence and all that, we have other countries which, you know, if you look at Transparency International and the parameters, depending on the leadership at the top.
You must agree that that is a strong allegation, David Louis Rubongo. You're saying that the president is the most corrupt person within this country, that corruption starts from the top, meaning you're alluding to the president. But this is the president that put in place the anti-corruption unit. He's put in place so many measures to fight corruption within this country. He's been engaged torture within this country.
But that's what you see what a person does and what he says. We judge them by the actions, not by their words. Because if you say that the president came out and condemned torture, first of all,
a week later, the VC of Victoria University was being
arrested in such a manner, in a violent manner. If you say that, for example, look at, I mean, veering off from the corruption, but talking about torture, who was the beneficiary of the torture? Who was the ultimate beneficiary of all these abductions that took place in this country? He said people should not be held for a very long time. Up to now, we have people at Chitalia who have not seen a judge, who have not been taken to a court of law. 8 months later. So
if he comes up with all these recommendations against torture and so forth, yet it continues to happen at the hands of his own security apparatus, does that mean he's not in control of the security?
It means that he's aware of the things that are going on. You know, that's what I'm trying to say. He's a commander-in-chief. When he comes out and says, for example, don't murder people, don't torture people, we want to see the perpetrators of these actions arrested.
Shouldn't we be holding to account the bad apples and not the president himself?
That's
because he's denouncing it.
That's why I said, if the president does not agree with torture, let him bring out the people who tortured Honorable Chagulanyi Narua, let them go to court.
All right.
Let them be subjected to a court process. The people who tortured the General Katumba,
the people who beat up journalists?
Yes, the people who beat up journalists, the people who tortured General Katumba suspects, the people who tortured Kawesi suspects. Let these people, the perpetrators of torture, be taken before a court of law, before a judge. Let them have their day in court. So then we will say, okay, General Museveni is actually right in saying that these people should be, that he does not agree with their actions.
David Lewis Ruwangoya saying the president should walk the talk when it comes to corruption. Mr. Napoleon Nahamia, we still see you. You whipped us when we went to Kololo to actually cover the National Unity Platform when they were handing in that human rights report. He beat us up very, very badly. We did have many of our colleagues grappling with wounds, but then guess what? Many of the junior officers only got 6 months within jail, and Nahamia walked away scot-free. So, Mr. President, if the perpetrators are not brought to book or punished, it will only set a bad precedent whereby others are emboldened to do the same. They'll feel like, if Nahamia is scot-free, I should also do the same. I'll go scot-free because the president is happy. So in that regard, walking the talk is the way to go. Do you also believe that we should walk the talk? Hubbard, Taiwa, Musasi.
No, I must say that it's true. The president has been fighting corruption, has been fighting torture, and he has walked the talk.
How?
But, yes, he has walked the talk.
Examples,
But
please.
of course, like you have rightly said, there could be bad apples.
Indeed.
And the few bad apples, you cannot say that the whole basket of apples is rotten.
Indeed.
Now, first of all, I want to think we should differentiate. Somebody should not perpetuate criminality and try to politicize it. People get engaged into crime, and you feel they should not be punished for the crime because they are taken as political witch hunt, which is not the case. So we must differentiate, because if somebody gets into a crime, let him be punished for the crime. If you are not involved in crime, then you are not punished. But don't get into crime and they want to say it's political witch hunt.
How about, don't you think the problem is the softness with which government has approached this issue? Don't you think that's the reason why you're having people swindling this money with impunity, and they know if I steal COVID-19 relief funds, if I steal Emyoga money, all I have to do is apologize and they'll let me go scot-free?
No, but we have
the softness with which we've actually approached this issue.
But we have seen people being prosecuted for swindling government money. We have Obe, who recently died. He was in prison. We have Ruamafa, who was in prison. We have this Kazinda. All those who have swindled government money have been prosecuted. And I want to think that the law takes its course. But it's unfortunate sometimes the public law judges you.
Former Foreign Affairs Minister Sam Kutesa.
You see, we must differentiate between the two. There is that public court which looks Taiwa as corrupt. But the actual court does not find you corrupt. So if the public court condemns you and it cannot put you in prison, you leave the actual court to find you guilty and condemn you or prosecute you. So the problem we have had in Uganda is that we have that public court which comes out to condemn people without evidence. But where the evidence comes in, we have seen people being prosecuted, we have been seeing people being convicted, and it's very clear. So me, I think the president has walked the talk because he has tried to fight corruption, but people, I mean, people are people. He has done his best. But the few apples in the basket cannot make the whole basket as the rotten apples. No, no, no.
And that's why so many people are calling for institutional change, whereby we make sure that we uproot these bad apples. But when you just talk about how bad these bad apples are rearing their very ugly heads within government, they continue operating, they continue stealing money, and the status quo actually goes ahead. Shouldn't we be talking about institutional changes, whereby we constitute an audit on a mass scale in every government agency, ministry, and department to ensure that we sift all these other bad, unscrupulous people and flush them out of the government?
But
why is it so hard?
No, but one thing that does not even require...
Is the government afraid to step on
No,
some
it does
toes?
not require government change. And I've made it very clear that we have got government bodies which are in corruption.
All right.
For example, the Auditor General. If the Auditor General comes and audits your books of accounts and found you to have embezzled government money, it will take action. Now, the way action it takes, it makes a recommendation. And Parliament, in the course of going through those recommendations, they can even ask police to come and investigate. They will arrest you. They will prosecute you. But I want to say that the public court be differentiated from the actual court. You will see me driving a car, right? And the public thinking will be, I stole government money.
Mr. Taiba, you have people who believe the president is not actually going towards those very, very big fish within his government that have been corrupt, like Sam Kutesa, simply because he doesn't want to step on some bad toes, who might either bite him, you know, and remove him from office. This has happened in Guinea. Alpha Conde, he removed a very, very strong figure within the special forces. This person mobilized and removed him in office. So in Uganda, I've had this one too many times, that the president does not want to step on some toes because these people are so powerful, and if he, you know, annoys them, they might remove him from power. Is that the reason why we've been failing on corruption? We know these people who they are, but we are afraid to go after them because they are so powerful and they might bite us.
I wouldn't want to think so, simply because how does the president come step on you? He comes step on you when he has got evidence that you have been involved in crime. Who is responsible to bring this evidence? Government institutions responsible to do that. If the case comes out...
Government investigating itself and its own people?
No, it's not. I mean, I'm an individual, for example, like you have given an example of Honorable Kutesa. He's an individual, he holds an office. Whatever happens there, the institution of government has the right to come and investigate what he does based on the allegation that is made. Now, if the institution comes out with that evidence and the president comes that the evidence is very clear, he has no reason not to step on him. But I wouldn't expect that the president is going to step on anybody in this country based on rumor or the public court. So whatever we are talking, most what people are talking is just public court or rumor. But if evidence is very clear that you have been involved in embezzlement and this is what you have embezzled, then there is no reason why the president cannot step on you.
All right, please react to that, David Louis Rubongoya.
Well, of course he has said a lot of things, and I think the citizens of this country are there, and they're watching us, and they know what has been happening.
Indeed, David.
They know that these institutions of government have been politicized, and if you see the people who are in charge of prosecuting, for example, the corrupt, how they end up in those places, and you remember the former IGG actually, you know, was lamenting. He said, you know, the challenge I have is that every time I go to go after the big fish, I find them hiding behind the president. And we've seen this a lot of times. It's not once or twice, where they arrest someone and then a few days later, people from elders from that area come up and say, we want you to release our son, and the person in a few days is released without charges and that kind of thing. So everyone knows what is happening. For me, that's why I say that the problem with this country is governance.
Of course, you talked about corruption, and the Myoga money was released during the campaigns. Do you also think that was corruption in its own
It is corruption. All this is corruption. These projects are put there, these programs are put there, replicated. There is no clear plan. There is no... It is just to make sure that the system is entrenched in power.
We reached out to some of the beneficiaries, and this is what they said. For them, they thought this was a presidential handout because it was during the election. They thought, President Museveni was being courteous, was being kind, so he gave us some money. So many are grappling to pay this money back.
It is not the first time. You just see how the LCs have been treated. You know, every time there are elections, they say, now we're buying motorcycles or bicycles for LC1 chairpersons across the country and all that. All these are means through which corruption is perpetrated in this country. And so we need change at the top. We need to change the culture. We need to, Ugandans sit down together and say, this is where we want to go.
Since the president was mandated and given the mandate by the people of Uganda during these elections, he's constitutionally the recognized president within this country. So changing him just because David Louis Rubongoya has mentioned it won't be taking center stage unless we wait for the 2026 election. So besides Museveni leaving power, because it's not happening before 2026, what other recommendations do you have for us to alleviate this challenge and continue helping our vulnerable people? Because if we are saying leaders stole this money, Myoga, COVID-19 relief funds, it means if I was vulnerable and expecting this money, I did not get it. So I'm still vulnerable, and I might have died even of hunger. So what should be done?
Yeah,
right
first
now,
of all, I'm here to speak on behalf of National Unity Platform, which is struggling to take power in this country. So I needed to make that clear. It's not that when I say that we need to change leadership at the top, I'm basically saying that that's our agenda, and we're going to continue pursuing it until we achieve it, because we believe, in fact, that the people of Uganda gave us a mandate which was messed with. Now, about some of the practical things we're doing, our members of parliament have been extremely vocal.
Yeah.
The person who heads the local government's accountability committee, the Honorable Mapenduzi, was selected by our party to head that committee.
We'll have him this week.
And he is going out there to first of all expose the rot that is there. And of course, Honorable Segona in charge of the Public Accounts Committee, Honorable Sen in charge of COSASE and all that. Our leaders are going on to do their work, to do their mandate, to make sure that there's accountability. But like I said, there's so much they can do, because eventually, even when they make these reports, they will have to bring these reports to the Parliament, which in many ways is not independent, which in many ways, you know, that's what I'm trying to say. That
so besides oversight investigations, do you believe you as MPs, you need more power to actually work out many of the interventions that the executive has ring-faced to its side?
Because
like
ultimately, and that goes back to what I talked about, the change in governance and the change in approach. That as long as you have the same system, no matter how much our MPs try to unearth this rot, you will see people go scot-free. They will come, be in the news today, say this and that, but then because of the politics, nothing will happen. And in fact, you remember, that's what I was saying. I would want him to remind us what happened. When the Auditor General did the first report, and showed a lot of things that went wrong with the management of COVID funds. Nothing was done to these people. They just made a report to Parliament, and it ended there. And so this is what we've seen every successive year. The Auditor General does a report, the IGG does a report, and nothing happens. People are not prosecuted.
Let me come in there.
Pitch in.
Actually, what happens, the Auditor General is under Parliament.
Yeah.
When Auditor General makes a report, he makes a report to Parliament. When Parliament finds out, since in the report, it will actually ask government institutions to take action, like police, like, police to investigate. But if Parliament has not done that, I don't want to talk because I'm not the mouthpiece. Maybe they have not found the reason why investigation should be carried
Away
out.
from the Auditor General, Morning Active TV would like to focus on the recommendations or resolutions before I let you go. We've been talking about the problem too much. Shouldn't we be talking about the solutions? Don't you think by the executive ring facing most of these activities to its side, COVID-19 relief, MYOGA and so forth, do you think that's the reason why implementation has been docked or balked,
I want to talk about MYOGA.
Do you think you as a parliamentarian should be more involved when it comes to these public interventions that we are looking at as COVID-19 relief funds, MYOGA? Do you think it should be you as MPs who are actually in proximity with the people handling these projects and not the executive?
No, very true.
Because many people lie to the president.
Very true. I want to actually speak about MYOGA and the get out this bad,
260 billion.
Yes, get about this bad perception. Now, the MYOGA program came as the government initiative.
July last year, close to the election.
Yes, as the government initiative to work on the socio-economic transformation. Like any other initiative government has done right away from 1997.
So the argument is, shouldn't that be you as MPs coming up with these initiatives? Not the executive, because the executive doesn't have oversight roles.
Of course, government and the executive comes out with initiatives to transform this country. Our work as Parliament, as oversight, is to ensure that these government initiatives are effectively done, that service delivery, these programs are effectively done, and the people receive what they are supposed to receive. Are
you comfortable in that position, Taiwo, being the person who comes out to just say this program has failed? You don't want to be the person who says, I've birthed this idea, and this is how it's going to, ensure that it sees its first birthday?
Now, what happens is that if the program is being implemented, we as the oversight, we go on and see what's happening and where the loopholes. And we recommend. Are
you comfortable in that might? Just offering oversight?
Yes, we offer oversight and give recommendations.
Which are never implemented?
Which are never implemented, but which we think governments should implement. But I wanted actually to make clear on the MYOGA.
Right.
The MYOGA money came like any other government initiative. And what government was looking at those people not involved in farming, doing other type of jobs, but people who had constraints of capital. You are in this particular activity, but you don't have enough money to progress on your activity.
Small and medium-sized enterprises to boost household income.
Yes, but unfortunately, and which we have actually come out to condemn, is that the program, the initiative came when people have not been well sensitized to understand what this money is meant for. So when the money was announced, some people thought that it was money to be shared. Like you have said, the president is giving out money and we have to share it and enjoy it. When in actual sense, it was not paying for that. Now, they had so many requirements. Opening offices, registering associations, having signposts, blah, 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 blah. Now, all those things that were meant to be done, they could only be done for an established enterprise. Now, people came in to go and rush for the money and started doing that. Right? Purposely to access that money. And some of them have lost. Now, later to understand that this money is meant to work as seed capital for somebody in a particular enterprise.
Well, would you agree that seed capital 30 million Uganda shillings for all those numerous groups is little money? Should we increase the money?
No, no, no.
They're saying 30 million is
we
too
can
much.
increase the money if it is there, but to me 30 million is not little money. I will give an example. You are having a carpentry workshop, you are having a sewing machine, but you want to add another one. So if you get 1 million as a loan, it will buy you 2 machines.
Yeah.
And your job and your work will be what? Will actually progress. So it wouldn't be little money in the circumstances that this country has no has little resources.
But if you talk about
David, before we go, a few seconds.
Yeah, he talks about sensitization. I mean, it baffles me that he makes such comments here. There was a program called Intandikwa. There was a poverty alleviation program. Haven't you learned the lessons? There was youth livelihood project. All these projects, money is swindled. You give money to the teachers' circle, it is swindled. You give, now they are talking about the parish model. Everything is hit by the same challenges.
So to rectify this issue, before I let you go, should we involve MPs more, other than the executive?
Like I said, for me, nothing will be the solution. The solution is governance and changing governance at the top and the approaches. Ugandans don't need handouts. They need a hand up. The approach of handouts cannot work. It has not worked and it will not work.
Ugandans do not need handouts. They need a hand up. David Louis Rumongoya, the Secretary General of the National Unity Platform Party, highly vocal right here on Morning at NTV. This is highly a non-partisan news organization, and Morning at NTV, the platform alike. We also did have Honorable Taiwa Musa Sizi Habat. He is the MP for Kashongi County in Chiruhura District. Gentlemen, it's been a pleasure having you on this show. When you do not trade blows or anything like that, to me, that is democracy. Thank you. All right, the simple things. All right, that's it for this edition of Morning at NTV. Sarah Nantume, birthday shout-outs to you from my studio director. That is Mr. Daniel Sivachi J. He wishes you a joyous birthday today, but unlike that picture, he would like to let you know that we do have a pandemic, and you should be wearing a face mask when you get into that hot concentration of more than 10 people where you're going to be having that party. And to all the other kings, queens, boys, and girls who are celebrating their birthdays on this particular Tuesday, the 14th day of September, please enjoy joyously, but be cognizant of the fact that COVID-19 is still here. 129,587 cases have been registered, 95,878 have actually recovered, and we do know that 3,099 people have died. My name is Romy Busiku. Let's interface tomorrow. We have a lot more coming in tomorrow. Honorable Rebecca Kadaga, we are actually looking for her to ensure that she comes to your screens. Good morning.